Hello, I'm a system administrator for the Science Fiction Book Club podcast. Please tell us your age, education, employer, and position. You didn't fill these out when you subscribed.
What do they have to do with the podcast?
When you've reached this episode, you must provide these pieces of information. If you refuse, Science Fiction Book Club will be permanently closed to you.
Okay.
Very good, Opsa. You satisfy the conditions for continuing this podcast.
Thank you. Can I ask you a few questions?
You may not, but we welcome you to keep listening.
Welcome back to Science Fiction Book Club, a podcast for fellow bookworms and stargazers. In every episode, we dive deep into the pages of our favorite science fiction novels to break down the big ideas, ask the nerdy questions, and maybe, just maybe, learn a little bit about ourselves along the way. I'm your host, Opsa, and with me, as always, is Abu.
The system administrator for this podcast.
That's right. I hope you've all listened to the audiobook and enjoyed it as much as we have. That was in fact the voice of the administrator.
I did my best. To
very
match that
faithful
voice.
rendition, which is hilarious.
Well, what an exciting set of chapters we're going to get into today, Opsa, chapters 15 to 20 in the Three-Body Problem. But as always, quick bit of housekeeping here at the top of the show before we dive in. First and foremost, a spoiler warning. As the title indicates, we are diving into these chapters today. So please, before you continue listening, make sure you've done the reading and you have read through chapter 20 of the book.
And as always, we certainly encourage you to read along with us, share your thoughts, email us at sci-fi-bookclubpod@loreparty.com, join our Patreon at patreon.com/sci-fi-bookclubpod. You'll find reading guides and discussion questions, bonus clips, bloopers, all the good stuff on that Patreon. And of course, you'll also find our Discord, where we keep the nerdy sci-fi discussions going with all of the new readers in the community. Shout out to Discord. It's awesome to see everybody there.
Yeah, truly. I love the people that are like, I just ordered my copy so I can read along with you. That's such a fun.
And then the next photo is of them holding the book, and it's like, I love this. This is awesome. You know, this is a community.
Exactly the kind of community we want to foster.
Absolutely.
And again, don't worry about looking those things up later. Links will be in the show notes for you to find the Patreon and the Discord and the email. Now, as always, a quick overview of today's episode. We're going to start by summarizing the chapters assigned for today's reading. Then we'll share some of our impressions and predictions of the reading thus far. And finally, we will dive deep into our sci-fi analysis, digging into a couple of really fun takeaways.
That's right. And just before all of that, we wanted to share some of the poll and question results from Spotify.
Yeah. Did you have one you wanted to share first, Opsa?
Yeah. I mean, so from last episode, we asked the question, do you think that civilizations are naturally predatory? This, of course, inspired by our last readings, and 90% of people said yes, that civilizations are indeed naturally predatory.
Incredible. Okay.
I will say,
who's the 10%?
I will admit to having also answered the poll, and I was the one holdout that thought maybe not. Maybe there are civilizations out there that, can just live at peace with the other beings in their galaxy.
Look, I appreciate your optimism, but clearly our listeners have spoken.
The people have spoken.
90% of y'all think that civilizations are predatory. That was fun. Thank you for responding to that poll on Spotify. There's another one as well from a previous episode. We asked all of you, do you believe there is a limit to science? And that, of course, also pertained to our conversation in that episode. And this one split right down the middle. 50% said yes, and 50% said no.
Which I love. I mean, that's an interesting question. Clearly, people have lots of thoughts on it. And it's interesting to see that, half of you out there are on the side of, we'll figure things out. Science can find a way. And the other half are less sure.
Yeah. Really fun to see that data, considering from our conversation, you and I kind of landed in different camps as well about
Yeah,
it. So
totally.
it's a big question, and clearly we don't have the answer to it yet.
You got to appreciate Leo Cixin and this book for raising those questions. Clearly, these are ones that kind of strike at the heart of our own musings about life and our place in the universe.
That's right. Thank you all for checking out those polls and questions that we post on Spotify. If you listen on Spotify, all you have to do is scroll down on the episode page and you can see the polls and questions. And we try to do one poll and one question for every single episode. So that's kind of a fun way for you to interact with us and interact with the community as well.
And as you just heard, we'll probably read those out. We totally
Yep.
love seeing them, and we think our readers are smart. We've got great people in the community. So a
Definitely.
book club means we'll share everybody's ideas and thoughts here.
For sure. For sure. Okay. Well, let's take a quick breather. But when we come back, dear listener, we're diving into today's reading. So stick around and we will see you in a minute.
Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome back, listeners. And now let's jump into our summary. Beginning with Chapter 15, Copernicus, Universal Football, and Trisolar Day. At the outset of this chapter, Wang jumps back into the game as Copernicus. In this world, Galileo and Aristotle are present, and they're discussing Galileo's approach, which, unlike Mozart and others in the previous chapters, relies on large amounts of observational data and experiments, as well as strict logical deductions and rigorous testing to validate or invalidate their theories. Bit of an upgrade from
Sounds
the
good.
previous theories. So far, so good.
Right.
But it's at this time that Wang finally shares his theory, that the secret to the eras on this world is that it has three suns, and their mutual gravitational pull causes the movements to result in the chaotic and stable eras. In other words, they are suffering from the titular three-body problem.
Roll credits, baby. We're done.
Oh, yeah. We're done. Yep. Chapter 15. But they, of course, laugh him off and prepare to burn him to death, revealing that if he dies, he actually won't be able to return as his retinal scans have been recorded.
Incredible.
Just before his execution, however, a trisolar day does in fact occur, and the world is destroyed again. But an in-game message at the very end indicates that Wang was correct, and thus the game progresses to level 2.
Amazing. Okay, chapter 16, which is simply titled The Three-Body Problem.
Oh, yeah.
Wang exits the game after having made it to level 2, and he immediately gets a call from Da Shi and Shen Yufei's reclusive husband, Wei Cheng. And he goes to the police station, and this kicks off this extremely drawn-out tale of a supremely boring man. I have a lot to say about this in our discussion later. But to quickly get through the summary here, Wei basically explains that he's in danger. He shares his entire life story for some reason. And the TLDR is that he is this like genius, naturally gifted mathematician, but he's uninspired and lazy and apathetic. And he ended up at a monastery where he basically developed this like practice of visualizing three bodies in orbit around each other, aka the three-body problem.
Right.
And Their chaotic nature kind of kept him occupied. It quieted his mind, and he sort of starts just naturally trying to solve the three-body problem as well, and comes up with this like revolutionary, evolutionary algorithm,
Right.
which catches the attention of Shen Yufei, who's also at this monastery with a group of Japanese tourists. And one thing leads to another. Eventually, they get married kind of for no reason. They don't really love each other, but it's very convenient, and she offers him comfort and luxury, and he offers her a potential solution to the three-body problem that she so desperately desires. We jumped back to the present, and Wei explains that he got a call the previous day threatening his life, basically, if he doesn't stop trying to solve the three-body problem. But then in the middle of the night, Shen Yufei, at gunpoint,
Oh my God.
also threatens to kill him if he does stop.
That's right.
So at this point, Wang and Da Shi and Wei, they head back to Shen Yufei and Wei's house, only to discover that she has been murdered.
Oh my, what is happening?
This went from 0 to 100 so quickly.
From so boring to suddenly blockbuster moment?
Suddenly, she's been murdered, and the assassin just narrowly gets away. Like, they literally look out the window and someone is speeding away in a car.
Right.
And as the chapter closes, Wei gives all of his research, all of the discoveries that are genuinely revolutionary in this space. He gives them all to Wang and is like, hey, go ahead and just publish this under your name because I don't really care.
Right.
And he also kind of cryptically shares this conversation that he heard between Pan Han and Shen Yufei that we'll talk a little bit more about later in our takeaways.
That's right.
And that's chapter 16.
Chapter 16 was a hitter. On to chapter 17. Three-body. Newton, von Neumann, the first emperor, and trisolar syzygy. A word I had never encountered and have never encountered since.
And I've never had to type until now.
Exactly. How many times did I type that? That's a word that has 3 Y's in it. So for all my Scrabble fans out there, look up syzygy. Because that is syzygy? That is like a 99-point word right there. Just fire. 3 Y's and 3 vowels. So it's awesome. 3 consonants.
Yeah, amazing.
So in any case, chapter 17 opens with, once again, Wang back in the game, who is clearly addicted at this point.
Oh boy, yeah.
And in it, there are a few characters, as usual, discussing a theory. And in this case, it's von Neumann's idea, who proposes to build a computer with humans operating as the circuitry.
Whoa!
Pretty interesting. To demonstrate his idea, he's got a few soldiers essentially mimic the logic gates that comprise a computer's basic operations. And it's convincing. The emperor eventually agrees to construct a large-scale version with his army of 30 million soldiers. This computer, dubbed Qin 1.0, does in fact succeed in predicting a stable era. However, it's short-lived, as soon after a disastrous trisolar syzygy occurs. As the 3 suns of the world line up, the gravity on the planet also stacks up, causing all of the soldiers and planet's inhabitants to float upwards to their death and destruction. And once again, the civilization is wiped out.
Yep.
But immediately afterwards, once again, a phone call. I don't know how they're timing this, but incredible. Right. Just same plot device. Gets a phone call. Super strange. And in this case, it's from supposedly a game administrator demanding his personal info in order to continue playing. Satisfied, he's eventually invited to an IRL meetup. They're going to meet in person.
Okay, this meetup, huge.
Oh, yeah.
Huge. Okay,
We've
so chapter 18.
Lots to say.
Lots to say here. Chapter 18, the meetup. Wang goes to a cafe, and there's a small group there. Everyone appears to be from a similar social class, though. They're all sort of social elites. There's, for example, is the VP of China's largest software company, a famous writer, a well-known philosopher. It's all really the cream of the crop.
Right.
The meetup organizer arrives and turns out to be none other than our boy and number one suspect, Pan Han.
Oh, yeah. Decked out. He's also like impeccably dressed for the first time ever.
Amazing. Pan Han arrives and Wong is like, oh, fuck. And he immediately texts Da Shi.
Yeah.
And luckily, Da Shi's on top of this. Sounds like he's like already outside listening in, which is amazing.
Right.
Always working that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, finally, Pan Han reveals basically the truth of this game to the gathered group. He says that the game's world is real. And Tri-Solaris and its people, the Tri-Solarans, are actually very real and have been trying to solve a three-body problem for millions of years.
Yeah. I mean, just wild.
Now, Pan Han also explains that the game's purpose is to find like-minded individuals like this gathered group who would welcome the arrival of the Tri-Solarans if they were to come to Earth. And he then sort of like quizzes each person one by one.
Right.
Two of the attendees voice concerns. They're like, wait a second, are we actually
sure about
game
this?
for an alien invasion? Like, is that what we're talking about here?
All right.
And these two are immediately dismissed. Clearly, they don't pass the test here.
Yep.
But Wong, sort of by dodging the question a little bit and being like, yeah, what he said, Wong is able to fool them and is accepted among this group.
Yeah.
What a huge chapter. Huge revelations.
Oh, absolutely. 18 chapters in, and we've finally gotten to the bottom of this mystery. At least the mystery of the game.
Right.
And in chapter 19, Three-Body, Einstein, the Pendulum Monument, and the Great Rip, Wong once again logs back into the game.
My guy, get some help.
I'll remind us, have yet to again hear about his wife and child.
Who's taking the kid to school?
He is totally immersed. He's given up on real life. He's just
truly.
It's even though he knows the point of the game and its mechanics.
Yeah.
Nothing quite holds up as compared to the game.
Yeah.
And it's clear this time in that the civilization has again advanced significantly from his last visit. We get to see this kind of funny scene with a impoverished, destitute Einstein just hanging out on the street, playing a violin, commiserating about the failures of their civilization to solve the three-body problem, and also that his solution seems to have failed, though he, in unsurprising fashion, blames the universe for being inelegant and wrong, and is still committed to his own pet theory. As Wong progresses, he ends up finding a mass of people near a building that is kind of fashioned after the UN, where he sees this absolutely massive pendulum.
Hello.
And in conversation, it's revealed that it's a monument and a tombstone for Tri-Solaris. They have finally concluded that the three-body problem is, in fact, unsolvable. And the effort has come to a head. It's over.
Yeah.
It's further revealed that through their research, they also discovered that their world used to be part of a 12-planet system, and the three suns have consumed all of the others.
Incredible.
Yeah. Just terribly fated, these people. And they've got less than 1,000 years till their planet's eventual demise as well.
Yeah.
So we come to the crux of it. Their only hope is apparently for them to leave their galaxy and find a new home for their people.
Right. Wow. All right, chapter 20, our last chapter today is called Three-Body Expedition. In his final entry to the game, thank God, Wong finds a barren planet. And what he sees instead is hundreds of millions of people just silently looking up at the sky.
Eerie.
And when he too looks up, he sees a startling sight. The Tri-Solaran interstellar fleet is about to take off. And we learn that their destination is 4 light years away, which happens to be just as far as Earth's sun is from its nearest neighbor.
Interesting.
Connecting some dots here.
Curious.
We also learned that the fleet can only move at about 1/10 the speed of light. So on a cosmic scale, they're really going at a snail's pace here. But regardless, the Trisolarans are desperate and their journey has begun. Their destination, seemingly, is Earth. And then the game ends. That's it. No more game for Wong. He's going to have to find another drug. The final text appears, and we're told that Wong will be sent an email for the next meetup of a group we are told is called the Earth Trisolaris Organization, the ETO.
And there we have it.
That's that. That is our summary, chapters 15 through 20. Some big revelations, some high highs, I would say, and some low lows
Some
in a Buddhist
truly
monastery.
monotonous moments. Yes.
Oh, boy. I have a couple of mixed feelings about this chapter, just getting into our impressions here. I loved the big reveals, right? Huge revelations.
Totally.
We finally, as you said earlier, we finally get to the core idea of this book. The 3-body problem, the truth about the Trisolarans, and the truth about the incoming alien invasion.
Right.
But if I can switch gears for a little bit here, as exciting as those revelations were, this whole set of chapters was a bit of a mixed bag for me as a reader. Specifically, as we've kind of been joking this whole time, the Wei Cheng chapter. My God, this was such a tough read. Wei Cheng, isn't even a real character, really. He's literally just this plot device, MacGuffin-ish tool who shows up to do nothing but explain basically the titular idea of this book. What is the 3-body problem and how he solved it, or tried to solve it through his evolutionary algorithm. That's the only purpose he has served in the story so far. Unless he does something later down the line, that seems to be all he's here to do.
Right.
And this is just maybe just a personal quibble of mine, but the whole tortured genius recluse who goes to a Buddhist temple to find himself, that was so hard for me to just swallow. It was so unbelievable. It was far too convenient of a plot device to get an idea across. It was giving me major Doctor Strange vibes. Wait, but magic isn't real, so you're not actually. I don't know. It was hard for me to swallow. I didn't like it. I really disliked it in general how Lu Cixin handled this chapter and the character of Wei Cheng. And again, this feels like a prime example of this book sacrificing its characters at the altar of its ideas. Something we've chatted about before. Ideas in the story come first. This has been the
primo
shining
example
of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So kind of a bummer. That chapter was a tough one for me to get through, and my eyes were certainly glazing over. But it wasn't all bad. I want to be clear. I still really enjoyed this segment. The chapters in the VR game, super interesting, right? The first Trisolar event, the human computer, just trying to visualize that.
So cool, yeah.
It was also really fun. I did some Googling, and it was fun to see how much research, presumably, Lu Cixin has done for these VR chapters to make them as sort of scientifically coherent as possible.
Right.
There's all these little historical Easter eggs that Lu throws in there with the scientist characters in the game.
Right.
I didn't know this, but for example, Einstein was actually a violinist.
Right.
And there's even speculation out there that music was so core to his life and to the way that he thought that it played a role in his discovery, of course, of the iconic E=mc² formula.
Well, he may have been at a Buddhist monastery for all we know.
For all we know.
He was not, but
no, he wasn't at all. So that was pretty cool. So then I Googled someone else that I know very little about, von Neumann, and I went down a rabbit hole of reading about his work. This dude was also a prodigy, it was giving Wei Cheng vibes. This dude was a 20-year-old and people were already calling him the next great mathematician,
Right.
But from my research, I learned that he was one of the principal creators of basically the modern computer architecture that resulted in the whole field of basically computer science. And so given that context, it's fun to know that he was included in the chapter where they create the human computer in the VR game.
Totally. And like me, you may have been mispronouncing his name the entire time as von Neumann. But thank you for reminding us that it is, in fact, von Neumann.
Yeah. The audiobook certainly helps. I will say we were talking recently off mic. We have butchered pronunciations during this whole
Every
read through.
single name.
And
every
you know,
time.
I, for one, want to just apologize. We are trying our best. And I try to really listen to the audiobook and basically repeat what the audiobook says and how it pronounces it. But, you know, sometimes the old tongue slips and the old Midwest accent comes out again.
That's right. Pass the milk. That's it.
Pass the what?
The milk.
I'm sorry. Can you? What do you pass the?
That's right. Pass the milk. You know, the thing, the white liquid in the beverage. You know, in the carton, the milk.
So here, I'll wrap up my impressions by just saying I'm excited to see where the story goes next. We've clearly hit Act 3, right? Like we've had these major revelations, and now we're going to see the fallout of what takes place. What about you, though? What did you think?
I totally agree. I'm in the same boat as you. I found this block of chapters to have high highs and super mids, I think is how I would put it. But I definitely continue to enjoy the game. And we certainly got to see a lot of it in this section of the book. I am happy that that particular mystery has reached its conclusion.
Yeah.
Super compelling, and I absolutely wanted to get to the bottom of the game. But I will say there may have been just like one too many game scenes for my taste. As really
Agreed.
great as they were, it just felt like, all right, I think we've beaten this horse. let's move on.
Yeah, I agree.
But of course, the human computer trisolar syzygy, super inventive, really fun, and it's for me also where Liu Cixin's just considerable techno scientific know-how really shines. You know, when he can lean into showing us versus telling us what he knows. It's much more of a home run. You know, it's a lot more entertaining and compelling. And I agree. You don't have to look much further than Wei Chang's tale to see where that completely fails. You know,
Right.
I also found Wang Miao's confrontation with death / permanent removal from the game really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it kind of shadows or mirrors Ya Jitai and Ya Wenji's confrontations with their own mortalities. But in really clear contrast to them, he's clearly far less courageous, at least in that moment. You'll remember that at the thought of not being able to return to the game, remember the game,
Right.
He was, quote, seized by a nameless terror. Which just incredible, you know. Not the thought of maybe life on Earth being destroyed or not being able to see his wife and child, but his time in the game coming to an end caused him to feel this terror.
That's a great point.
I did also definitely have some questions, which are somewhat, though not fully answered in the passage I'll share shortly. But in particular, why was Shen Yufei so eager to find a solution to the three-body problem? You like definitely spoke to that a little bit, but if the Trisolarans have already left their system, then like, what's the point? You know,
right? What are we solving?
Like, why are we doing this? You know, and I will say also, reading this section, I was super curious, of course, to know the identity of the commander, who was just mentioned briefly by Wei in his final remarks to Wang Miao and Da Shi. And I want to dive into that section in our analysis, but I'll just kind of tease it up by reminding us of that cryptic conversation that Wei Chang overheard between Shen Yufei and Pan Han. Quote, Shen, yes, you're trying to use our Lord's power against the human race. Pan said, your understanding is not completely unreasonable. We want our Lord to come to this world, to punish those who have long deserved it. However, you're working to prevent our Lord's coming, and that's why we can't tolerate you. If you don't stop, we'll make you stop. Shen said, the commander was blind to allow you to join the organization. Pan, speaking of, can you tell whether the commander sides with the Adventists or the Redemptionists? Does the commander want humanity eliminated or saved? So interesting.
Wow.
Really, really interesting. You know,
So
and
many things to tease out there.
really lots of compelling ideas just in that one conversation.
Right.
I don't know about you, but based on this passage, it sounded like to me the Adventists wanted to see humans scourged by the Trisolarans or otherwise somehow kind of cede control to them.
Yeah.
While the Redemptionists perhaps just want the Trisolarans to help humanity save or redeem itself with, you know, the knowledge and wisdom that presumably this advanced alien civilization has.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's mild speculation based on the name of those groups and that question that Pan asks, but I don't know. I think it's plausible.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's take another quick breather then, Obsa. But, dear listener, don't go anywhere, because up next, we have some dense scientific ideas and themes to pick apart in this book in our takeaways. So we'll be back in just a minute.
All right, and we're back now to dive into our sci-fi analysis. As you can
Yes.
already tell, we've got lots of ideas that we want to unpack and talk about. This
Yeah.
was a really intriguing chapter. And Abu, I think I'll toss to you. I love your first takeaways here.
Okay, well, here's what I wanted to get into for my takeaway. I wanted to hone in specifically on this quote. Quote, as he gazed up at the awe-inspiring swings of the Trisolaran pendulum monument, Wong asked himself, does it represent the yearning for order or the surrender to chaos? End quote. Super fascinating. This immediately stuck out to me on a reread.
Yeah.
Because it touches on a lot of the big thematic elements we've talked about in our episodes so far.
Right.
So I wanted to dig a little further into this. So getting into it, on the surface, yeah, like duh, the pendulum is a monument to honor Trisolaran history. Great.
Totally.
But I think what Wong's observation offers is a different interpretation of perhaps what the monument represents. Wong is potentially asking, are the Trisolarans giving up in the face of a seemingly impossible problem, an impossible three-body problem? And to put it another way, to tie it into an idea we've talked about before, have the Trisolarans found the edge of their scientific understanding?
Wow.
Right?
What a callback. All
Frontiers of Science, anyone?
Yeah,
Somebody call
yeah,
them up,
yeah.
let them know.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a valid question to ask here, and I think that's on Wong's mind as well. Have the Trisolarans faced a problem in the scientific universe, in physics, that they simply can't solve, and thus they're giving up? Have they reached the limit?
Right.
And to be fair, there is certainly this like pervasive sense of defeat when Wong is here at the UN building talking with the Secretary General. The Trisolarans, of course, have basically proven with their advanced technology at this point that the three-body problem can't mathematically be solved. And it's interesting because this revelation kind of throws Wong himself into an existential crisis.
Right.
Quote, if even an extremely simple arrangement like the three-body system is unpredictable chaos, how can we have any faith in discovering the laws of the complicated universe? End quote.
That's what a conundrum, you know?
What a conundrum. Yeah. And imagine, I'm no astrophysicist, but like, is a four-body problem worse? Right.
Right.
What about a five-body problem?
Right.
We like now we're getting into like planetary orgies and like, how do you solve those?
You don't solve them. You join them.
Like we can't even solve a planetary threesome, and like the idea of trying to figure out an orgy seems impossible.
Right.
Now, what I found kind of admirable though is despite learning this, right? Despite learning that the three-body problem can't be solved, the Trisolarans are giving up, Wong still refuses to give in. He's kind of like, well, okay, wait. So you've evolved enough technologically that maybe you just can survive chaotic eras, right? They just don't affect you anymore.
Right,
like you can build up the technology to protect yourselves.
Right.
He's, of course, a scientist, right? He is still going to try and solve a problem. When faced with an impossible problem, he will find solutions. I found that quite admirable, that Wong's reaction was not total despair.
Right.
And look, I want to also call out that despite the like somber mood And presumably the Trisolarans, having given up on this, they aren't giving up on surviving in general, right? They're giving up on this one problem, and they're shifting their strategy from perhaps, thinking of that quote from earlier, they're shifting their strategy from trying to find order in their chaotic solar system to instead fleeing from the unstoppable chaos of their tri-solar system.
Right.
They've sort of accepted and embraced the role of the cosmic die they've been given, right? And so instead of trying to find order in it and solve it, perhaps they're just thinking of it differently. They're reframing it.
Right. Fight or flight, you know?
Exactly. So thinking back to that original quote that I shared, Wang pondering what the pendulum means, I would posit that the pendulum actually means both. It does represent what was once a yearning for order among the Trisolaran people. But it also represents that they have now surrendered to the chaos. The pendulum will swing like the pendulum will swing.
Right.
And I also wanted to share the second half of that quote. I left it off earlier. Here's the rest of that quote from the book. Wang also thought of the pendulum as a gigantic metal fist, swinging eternally against the unfeeling universe, noiselessly shouting out Trisolaran civilization's indomitable battle cry.
Hell yeah, brother!
Hell yeah, brother!
That's awesome. A real fist of the universe.
That's right. So I think so much can be read into the Trisolaran monument that they've put up. Yes, you can see it as them giving up on the three-body problem and thus giving up on a scientific solution, but you can also see it as a monument to their future resolve.
Right.
And them dedicating themselves to surviving, to escaping this cycle of death and destruction that their planet has been stuck in for 90 plus million. I mean, 90 million years was just what the last generation went through. Like this is so many millions of years that they've battled their solar system in this way. To wrap up my takeaway, I wanted to take this one step further. Because as I was pondering this, I couldn't help but think of the environmental message that's sort of been seeded throughout this book.
Right.
Think to Pan Han and the organization that he represents, right?
Right. As early as the first couple chapters.
As early as the first few chapters. There certainly seems to be an environmentalist message throughout the book. And in the fate of the Trisolarans, I couldn't help but think of the climate crisis. There's so much in this book about the idea of nature versus science. And we talked in one of our earliest episodes about whether science can solve every single problem that humanity will ever face.
Right.
And the Trisolarans have come to learn, no, science cannot solve the problem of our solar system. And perhaps, this is just sort of my interpretation, but perhaps Liu Cixin is also arguing that in the face of something like the climate crisis that we have brought upon ourselves, science won't be the solution. And then rather than trying to find order and creating order here on Earth through scientific discovery, we need to surrender to the unstoppable forces of nature we've unleashed and perhaps gamble, like the Trisolarans, gamble among the stars as a possible future.
Evacuate.
It's a very cynical, right? It's very pessimistic and cynical outlook on humanity, which I think is just sort of in general Liu Cixin's entire outlook on humanity.
Certainly seems to be.
But I wanted to take that a step further and connect the dots here. Again, this is my interpretation, and maybe Liu Cixin wasn't trying to say anything about the climate crisis at all, but there's enough here in the book about science versus nature and scientific solutions, and then this idea of the Trisolarans surrendering to chaos, that a lot of those dots connected for me, at least.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what a profound takeaway. I mean, I totally love that. There's such a, I mean, I do think you're right that Liu Cixin clearly is thinking about the tragedy of the commons, like the tragedies and the destruction that we face on Earth. And it's totally plausible to me that is one of his buried messages, is to think about how we contend with that. Like maybe there is a similar moment for us when we come to accept that there is a limit to what we can accomplish with
Right.
just our science and engineering and mathematics.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. Super interesting stuff. Love it. Okay, I'm so excited to get into your takeaway too. So I'll hand the mic to you.
Okay, so I was really caught up with just that last passage I shared, wherein Wei Chang overheard Pan Han and Shen Yufei talking, and this phrase about Adventists and redemptionists emerges. And again, this is based on some speculation of what those respective groups might be, like what they might mean and what their causes are, but I hope a plausible read of it.
Yeah.
And I essentially I found that dichotomy between these two groups to be, a really interesting lens through which we can examine, our religious and social belief systems. This concept of redemptionists believing in our ability to somehow or the other kind of save ourselves or, achieve some sort of redemption versus the Adventists who appear to have a much more pessimistic outlook. And Adventists on Earth typically believe in the coming of some being that will cleanse our world.
Yeah.
And that I found to be interesting. I think it's safe to say that the core of most of our popular religions seems to fall on the redemptionist side.
Yes.
That despite our moral failings and transgressions, that there is a path to redemption, that
Yeah.
we can be saved. You take Christianity, there's, this concept of redemption through, faith or good works. In Islam, I believe there's forgiveness through repentance and good
Yep.
deeds.
Yep.
In Buddhism, enlightenment through the Noble Eightfold Path, and so on.
Right.
So, there's this kind of popular strand, this strong strand of hope for humanity despite our failings. But on the other side, we can't deny that there certainly have been groups and movements throughout history that have a much more apocalyptic, much less charitable point of view on humanity. And even in the major religions, there are, of course, sects that advocate war for peace or the cleansing of dissidents and enemies of the faith.
Yep.
But I think the most notable example of this attitude is probably the various death cults that have existed through time immemorial.
Yeah.
Did a little bit of research and I found Heaven's Gate, for example. They, amongst other things, believed human nature was corrupt and had to be rejected in order to ascend to a, quote, higher evolutionary level. Their words, not mine. And I will say, tragically and famously, this ended with the members committing mass suicide in 1997 in order to ascend to the alien spacecraft that they believed was hiding behind the Hale-Bopp comet.
Gotcha.
So, as far as I'm aware, no spacecraft that we found. It was just a celestial body, as many other comets. But there really are no shortage of cults that have a really similar story. So, yeah, this like self and other destructive tendency is definitely real, though thankfully only a minority perspective as far as we can tell. But what I found most interesting, to tie this back to the book, what I found to be really interesting is that the ETO, the Earth Trisolaris organization, seems to be targeting the social elites using the three-body game.
Right.
So, it's totally unclear, what side the recruits will end up falling on, whether the redemptionists or Adventists, but it's fascinating that the book sort of inverts your expectations about who would be vulnerable to this sort of thinking.
Right.
In a pure vacuum, I would expect the targets to be disaffected people on the fringes of society, and certainly not the highly educated, highly successful members of society by all of our traditional measures. But I don't know. I found the attitudes expressed by those intellectuals that we saw at the meetup in chapter 18 to be pretty plausible. And I think optimism and pessimism about the future of humanity can be found at all social levels, but often in fiction, we tend to expect our best scientists and our most highly rated thinkers to save us
Yeah.
from the huge looming disasters.
Right. These like holier than thou characters who
Exactly.
can do no wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The super soldiers, the superheroes, the genius scientists. Like Wei
Exactly.
Cheng is like this wonder kid who doesn't do shit.
Doesn't
You
do
know?
anything. Yeah, exactly.
So it is an interesting inversion of our expectation there that
Yeah.
traditionally in our fictional stories, we prop up these highly educated, highly intelligent, highly strong people to be our saviors. And in this story, Liu Cixin has turned them into deeply cynical people who have given up on the human race.
Yes. I mean, they're basically the harbingers of our doom, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. There are a few comments made by them at the meetup that stood out to me, and kind of speak to their attitude. You know, there's the famous novelist who says the human race is hideous.
Amazing.
You know?
Amazing.
Which wow, what a take. There's also that older philosopher who's got this super convoluted argument that the destruction of the Aztecs by the Spanish conquistadors was a good thing, and that the arrival of the Trisolarans would similarly be, quote, good news for the terminally ill human race.
This was so ass backwards.
Yeah, I definitely want to
Bro hasn't thought about the Aztec point of view his entire life.
Exactly. Like, that was the argument he trotted out, which, you know, what a take, you know?
Yeah.
And I think most directly, there was the young reporter who said, human society is incapable of self-improvement, and we need the intervention of an outside force.
Yeah.
And I'll conclude my analysis with maybe just a question that we can ask our listeners to weigh in on. Do you still hold out hope for humanity?
Hello. Okay. And what do you think of the Aztecs?
I hope so. Yeah, exactly. Twofold question. Part 1, any hope for humanity? Part 2, what do we think of the Aztecs? Justice for the Spanish conquistadors? Is that the take here?
Right. Truly. Oh my goodness.
I don't know. I mean, where do you fall? I mean, do you think we'll ever achieve a utopian future here on Earth?
Wow. Hope so.
Just lighthearted questions.
I am fasting today for Ramadan, so you're really short-circuiting my brain with this question. Let's see. Do I have hope for humanity? I think so.
Yeah.
I tend to lean toward perhaps a bit more of the hopeless optimist side of the spectrum.
Interesting.
And yes, you can look at sort of the long tail of human history and go, my God, it's just a trail of blood and tears and sweat.
Bodies
hit the floor, as someone once famously said.
Indeed.
Yes, you can have that view, certainly. But there is the alternative view that in between all of those deaths and in between all of that destruction, there were moments of beauty.
Right.
There were moments of growth. There were moments of what, you know, you could go so far as to say were miracles of human ingenuity, of human love and trust and giving and support. I mean, a lot of our modern structures that we take for granted certainly rely on humans trusting and liking each other enough to keep going, right? And yes, like the cynical read is we've built systems to prevent people from being stupid and not doing their jobs and whatever. But I think there is an optimist view that humanity throughout the course of its history has trended toward a better future where we are working together more closely, you know?
Right.
So I think that trend will continue. I am optimistic for the future of humanity. And I'm optimistic, actually, that the people who speak up, the sort of unspoken heroes that history doesn't remember, will be the ones that will make the changes, right? Changes don't come in waves. They come in very slow, incremental baby steps toward the better and brighter future. And I think that's hard for humanity to remember. We love a good story. We love a a hero who comes in and saves the day and changes the fate of humanity forever. But
Yeah.
that is a once in a blue moon scenario that happens way less often than the anonymous person that does one small thing that pushes the scale just 1% further in the right direction.
Right.
So I'm kind of getting rambly and philosophical here, but ultimately my answer is I do have hope in humanity and for humanity. And I certainly would get kicked out of this meeting if Panhan were to interview me. No way I'm getting accepted in the group.
Well, you can always pull a Wong Miao and just be like, what he said.
What he said. I agree.
I concur.
Totally.
Yeah.
Where do you think you fall?
I mean, I think you voiced a lot of my perspective as well. Like, I definitely tend to be an optimist when it comes to this like big question. I also definitely give room to the possibility that we'll blow ourselves up.
Stupidity is not to be underestimated.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like the wildest thing that we haven't gone through nuclear destruction yet. That we've got all these missiles pointing at each other, and that somehow in the intervening decades, not one of them has, been fired.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, it's really one of the scarier thoughts that all it takes is one individual with access to the nuclear codes in a country that has access to them. And there are a number. There are more than just a few with access. And so that I certainly lean on the optimistic side much as you do. But I'm also a prepper. I'm ready. I've got my cans of beans. I've got my milk. I've got my pop. I've got everything I need, baby.
You mean
bag
your soda?
after bag. That's excuse you. Bag after bag of hot Cheetos. I'm gonna be good.
Yes.
So
all the things that will survive the
just the
nuclear
essentials.
apocalypse.
Just the essentials.
Yeah, I mean, cockroaches and flaming hot Cheetos are two things that the nukes will barely touch.
That's exactly right.
They will survive. Yeah, I certainly don't want to dissuade you from prepping. I think that is also a very pragmatic reaction to human nature as well. Trust that we'll do the right thing, but prepare that we won't. Prepare for the fact that we won't.
Right.
That I think is a very reasonable and level-headed outlook, perhaps, on life.
Although maybe the Trisolarans have it right. Lean into the chaos.
Lean in, baby. That's true. All right. Well, that wraps up our discussion today. Another fun one. I mean, this book is just leading us down some really incredibly dense and fun philosophical, scientific rabbit holes about the nature of humanity, as science fiction does as a genre, right?
Yeah. And I can't wait to hear what people have to say about it.
Yeah.
To respond with these questions with.
Oh my gosh. Hop in the Discord, chat with us about this. Respond to those Spotify polls. We want to hear your answer too. Okay, we have some homework for you, as we always do at the end of the episode. For the next reading assignment, make sure you have read chapters 21 through 26 of Three Body Problem. We are really closing in on the end of this book. The next episode will be our penultimate. Only 2 more episodes to go in this book before we move on to our next. And I can't wait to see where it goes. And if you're curious on those reading assignments, if you're curious about what books we'll be covering the rest of the season, you can actually find our entire season's reading schedule linked in the show notes below. So go check that out and make sure you grab yourself a copy of any future books that we'll be reading as well.
That's right. And remember that on Patreon, you'll find the reading guide for this episode, as well as every episode we've recorded thus far.
Yes.
We've gotten great feedback on those. People seem to like them. If you've got any comments or suggestions, please just share them. We're all ears, and it's been fun putting them together. So I think
you've done an incredible job. I really want to shout you out. You've tackled the reading guide for each of these episodes, and you're coming up with some really beautiful art. You're using some AI tools to just come up with some like concept art that represents the ideas and themes we talk about in every chapter, in every set of chapters. It's been a joy to crack open those reading guides and take a peek.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate that.
props to you.
I will also say that we would love to have some fan art, some reader supplied art out there, and we would include it. We'd put it on the reading guides. We'd have it in Discord. But if you're an illustrator, a designer, a drawer, whatever the case might be, share your art. We love seeing it, and we love to see your thoughts as well. So
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. And personally, I hope that as the show grows and we start to generate enough revenue, that we can actually commission some artists out there to work with us on future projects. That would be so fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, friends, God is a gambler, and the only hope for this podcast is to gamble as well. So leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com.
You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, even if God were here, it wouldn't do any good. The entire human race has reached the point where no one is listening to their podcasts.
Hello, I'm a system admin. That's so many words, so many syllables.
So high pitched.
I know.